Well, we're still waiting for details on what the final ceasefire plan looks like. Here's where it stood before these negotiations concluded. At the moment, Israeli forces control all areas up to the blue line you see on the screen. The plan said once both sides agreed to the proposal, the war would end immediately and Israeli forces would withdraw to the agreed line, which is in yellow, to prepare for the release of the captives. Then, after all the requirements set out in the US 20-point plan are met, and an international stabilization force is deployed, Israeli forces will move further back to the red line. And the final withdrawal would see the Israelis move progressively further back towards the Israeli border, according to an agreement they would make with the transitional authority. But they would continue to maintain a security buffer zone inside Gaza's borders, including its crossing with Egypt. Let's bring in Mouin Rabbani. He joins us live from Montreal. He's a non-resident fellow with the Centre for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Mouin, we've spoken many times about Gaza over the last 2 years or so. I mean, Trump says this is a great day for the Muslim and Arab world. Let me ask you, is this a great deal, and how cautious should we be about it?
Well, I think we need to put it in perspective. When Trump and Netanyahu gave their joint press conference at the White House recently to unveil this proposal, Hamas was told, this is a 20-point proposal. You accept it all unconditionally, or you face total obliteration. Hamas managed to respond in a way that has now resulted in an agreement on one set of issues, exchange of captives, Israeli withdrawal, humanitarian aid, and cessation of hostilities. Those are the parts it was most interested in, while essentially ignoring and deferring those issues it could not accept. You know, the Blair Witch Project on governance, post-war governance of the Gaza Strip, disarmament, and the broader political files. So assuming that this part of the agreement is implemented, and some details we still don't know, we then enter into uncertainty. Will there be agreement on governance in the Gaza Strip? Hamas is interested in agreement, but is, I think, along with other Palestinians, opposed to this Blair project, which is being proposed. From Israel's perspective, it may suit its interests not to have this governing project implemented as well, because then it can continue with the current situation in the Gaza Strip, prevent reconstruction, and save for another day. So, and the second issue, of course, is Trump's attention span. We saw this very clearly earlier in this year, where an agreement was reached, and it later emerged his only real concern was having an achievement on his inauguration day. And once that milestone was passed, he didn't really particularly care what happened next. And that's why we're entering into another agreement now, whose deadline appeared to be Friday when the Nobel Peace Prize is announced. So the first phase will probably get implemented. The chances that it will then once again be abrogated by Israel with US passive or active complicity is, I think, very high. And the idea that it's going to lead into an effort to address and resolve the underlying political crisis, which is the entire reason we're having this discussion, is, I think, close to nil.
Mouin, I mean, you know, we know that Trump is not an ideologue. He's a transactional president. The point you make that he doesn't stay too long on one single issue. How much concern is there that once the captives are released, which is, of course, what Trump wants, he could just claim victory, walk away from this and say, well, I'll just leave it up to the negotiators and the Arab world to kind of move this thing forward then?
That's entirely possible. You know, you're right about Trump, but let's at least give him credit for this. Even this agreement is one that would have been impossible under Biden, precisely because Trump is not an ideologue, you know, devoted to Israel to the very marrow of his bones, like Biden was. Under Biden, the Israelis would have rejected this agreement, and Biden and Blinken would have trotted out to the microphones and say, Israel accepted all our proposals, but Hamas rejected them. Trump has now accepted this. And then the question, of course, becomes, you know, once he has the bright, shiny object of an agreement and is hailed as a conquering hero in Cairo or Jerusalem or wherever else, what next? Having said that, he is also very much fixated on investments from the Gulf states and on seeking the achievement of a normalization agreement between the Saudis and the Israelis. And should the US take that seriously, and there's absolutely no guarantee that it will, then Trump, in contrast to other US presidents, would, I think, be perfectly prepared to turn the screws on whatever Israeli government is sitting in office at that time.
Just a final thought to you on Netanyahu's endgame here, Mouin. I mean, Netanyahu was still talking about achieving his goals of this war, even as he negotiated a peace deal with Hamas. I mean, as our guests have been telling us all throughout the night, his priority was never really the Israeli captives being held in Gaza. It's always been to continue the war for his own political expediency. So what is Netanyahu's endgame here, even now with this ceasefire deal in play?
Well, first to say that the captives were leverage for Hamas only insofar as they could help with the release of Palestinian captives held in Israel. Other than that, they basically served as a pretext for genocide. And having this file closed may now make it more difficult for Israel to resume its genocidal military campaign. But having said that, I think Netanyahu sees two options. The first is to get what he wants out of this agreement and then to pick up where he left off. The second is to ensnare the Palestinians, this time also Hamas, into an Oslo-type process of interminable negotiations about nothing that result in nothing. And basically, while continuing with expansionist policies in the West Bank under that camouflage. And so the challenge for the Palestinians and for those who support their rights is to continue the momentum to shift away from these failed paradigms towards one which places Palestinian rights and accountability rather than impunity for Israel at the center of the agenda, rather than these pipe dreams about peace processes and two-state solutions that even those who proclaim their support for it don't believe in and do nothing to achieve. But I have to say, altogether, Israel is sitting quite pretty now if it is able to limit Palestinian options to either a resumption of genocide or an endless tunnel of Oslo-type negotiations with an even lower political ceiling than we had under Oslo.
All right, Mouin Rabbani, good to get your thoughts, Mouin. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.